In the heart of Seoul's Olympic gymnastics arena, a cocky Taekwondo champion stood poised before thousands, ready to provoke a legend. What was meant to be a harmless exhibition turned volatile when a social media-fueled prodigy insulted a seated martial arts master and dared him to stand. Chuck Norris wasn't your typical audience member. For over 50 years, he had served as martial arts royalty and elite special forces veteran and the undefeated karate champion whose silence often spoke louder than fists. He had come as a guest, but he left as something else. When Jae-ho Park called him a relic and challenged him to prove his worth, he never imagined he was awakening a dormant storm. Chuck stepped into the ring not with bravado, but with stillness and delivered a humbling so precise it echoed through generations. No theatrics, no wasted motion, just truth. What began as a showboating exhibition spiraled into a soul-deep confrontation, and the arena that once glorified spectacle would become ground zero for a warrior's rebirth and a legend's final lesson. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. A brutal kick echoed across the Olympic gymnastics arena in Seoul, sending the veteran fighter crashing to the mat. The crowd gasped as the referee dove forward, checking if the man could even move. But the victor, Jae-ho Park, was already parading around the ring. Arms raised high, grin stretched wide across his young face. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed through speakers that seemed to vibrate the very air. "The undefeated Taekwondo world champion, Jae-ho Park." The arena erupted. Thousands of phones lifted in unison, capturing the moment. Jae-ho strutted past the cameras, drinking in the adoration, basking in the glow of spotlights that traced his every move. At 24, he owned this stage not just because of his skill, but because of how he wielded it. With flair, with drama, with unapologetic showmanship. Mina Cho watched from the press box, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. She'd been covering martial arts competitions for 3 years now, but something about tonight felt different, electric. Yes, but also unsettling. As Jae-ho leaned over his fallen opponent, microphone in hand, she sensed the story shifting beneath her. "That's what happens," Jae-ho announced, voice carrying across the hushed arena. "When you bring old techniques to a new world." He glanced down at the veteran fighter, now being helped to his feet by medical staff. "Maybe next time. Stay home with the other relics." Some fans roared with excitement. Others exchanged uneasy glances. In the VIP section, seated in the front row, Chuck Norris remained perfectly still. At 84, the martial arts legend had long since retreated from the spotlight, making this rare appearance at the international exhibition only at the personal request of his old friend, Master Sun Hee Kim. He wore a simple black button-down shirt, his posture straight but relaxed. No entourage surrounded him. No fanfare announced his presence. Yet there was something about his stillness that drew the eye, a gravity that seemed to anchor the chaos swirling around him. His expression remained unreadable as he watched Jae-ho's celebration. No clapping, no reaction, just sharp, steady eyes that had seen 5 decades of fights come and go. Daichi Saito, standing at the edge of the ring, felt his pulse quicken. As Jae-ho's trainer and PR manager, he recognized opportunity when it presented itself. He'd spent 3 years cultivating his fighter's image. The bad boy of Taekwondo. The social media sensation. The champion who broke rules and records with equal abandon. But this was beyond what he'd planned. "Jae-ho," he whispered sharply, trying to catch his fighter's attention. "Wrap it up. We've got the highlight." But Jae-ho wasn't listening. Between the lights, the chants, the sea of phones capturing his every move, his eyes had locked onto something else, someone else. In the front row, unmistakable despite the years, Chuck Norris. Mina saw it happen in real time. The moment Jae-ho spotted the legend, She felt her throat tighten. No, she whispered to herself. Don't do it. But Jae-ho was already moving toward that side of the ring, microphone still in hand, sweat glistening on his forehead under the arena lights. Daichi recognized the look, the one that meant his carefully laid media plans were about to be trampled by Jae-ho's instinct for spectacle. Speaking of relics, Jae-ho's voice cut through the arena, silencing the crowd in an instant. I see we have one in attendance tonight. The camera operators, sensing drama, swung their lenses toward Chuck Norris. His image appeared on the massive screens hanging above the ring, calm, composed, eyes steady beneath the brim of his hat. Mr. Norris, Jae-ho continued, voice dripping with false respect. The man from all those old movies my father used to watch. The so-called master. He made air quotes around the word, drawing nervous laughter from portions of the crowd. Tell me, sir, what do you think of today's fighting? Too fast for you to follow? In the referee's corner, Master Sun, Hee Kim, a woman in her 70s with steel gray hair, pulled back in a tight bun, stiffened. As head official and the exhibition's organizer, she had invited Chuck personally, a gesture of respect to the man who had done so much for martial arts globally. Now she watched as her event veered into uncomfortable territory. Chuck didn't move, didn't flinch. His expression remained neutral, eyes fixed on Jae-ho with the same quiet assessment he might give to any opponent across a sparring mat. Daichi moved closer to the edge of the ring, waving frantically, trying to signal Jae-ho to stop. This wasn't the plan, this wasn't controlled. But Jae-ho had the crowd now, had the moment, and wasn't about to let it go. They tell stories about you, Jae-ho continued, pacing along the edge of the mat closest to where Chuck sat. How you were unbeatable. How no one could touch you. He snorted, spinning a practiced kick that stopped just short of the Ropessa flash of technique that drew appreciative gasps. But that was then, before fighters like me came along, before martial arts evolved. In the press box, Mina found herself holding her breath. The entire arena seemed to be leaning forward, waiting. Some of the older attendees were shaking their heads. Others looked embarrassed. But among the younger fans, phones lifted higher, live streams capturing what was quickly becoming the viral moment of the year. The game has changed, Mr. Norris, Jae-ho said, his voice dropping to a theatrical near whisper that the microphone nonetheless carried to every corner of the arena. What worked in the 70s is just slow motion now. He demonstrated with an exaggerated, slow-motion roundhouse kick that drew laughter from his supporters. Then, lightning fast, he snapped into a spinning hook kick that cracked the air itself. That's evolution, he announced. That's what happens when legends stay too long in the past. The crowd's energy had shifted, divided now. Some sections had grown uncomfortably quiet. Others chanted Jae-ho's name with increased fervor. Camera flashes intensified, a storm of light reflecting off the polished floor. And still, Chuck Norris hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. His eyes remained fixed on Jae-ho, his breathing steady, hands resting lightly on his knees. Master Kim stepped forward, speaking for the first time since the veteran fighter had been helped from the ring. That is enough, Jae-ho. The exhibition continues in. Actually, Jae-ho interrupted, turning to face her with a wide smile that didn't reach his eyes. I think we should give the audience what they really want. A real exhibition. He turned back toward Chuck. What do you say, Mr. Norris? Care to step into the present? Show us if there's anything behind the legend? A gasp rippled through the crowd. Daichi froze, his planned post-fight media strategy disintegrating before his eyes. This wasn't promotion, this was recklessness. Master Kim's voice cut through the arena, sharp as a blade. Champion Park! That is not part of today's program. But the energy had already shifted. Near the front rows, a chant began. Soft at first, then spreading, "Chuck, Chuck, Chuck." Jae-ho's grin widened as he played to the crowd. "See? They want to know too. Was it all just movies, Mr. Norris? Or can you still back it up?" The chant grew louder, though Mina noticed something in it now, not mockery, but something else. Anticipation. Respect. As if the crowd was calling not for spectacle, but for balance to be restored. Chuck, Chuck, Chuck. For the first time since Jae-ho had begun his taunting, Chuck moved. It was a small motion, just a subtle shift in his posture as he glanced briefly at Master Kim. Something passed between them. Decades of shared understanding compressed into a single look. Master Kim gave an almost imperceptible nod. Jae-ho, mistaking the exchange for hesitation, pressed his advantage. "No shame in declining, sir. Age comes for us all." His voice dripped with false sympathy. "I wouldn't want you to hurt yourself trying to keep up." Daichi had given up trying to intervene. He stood at the edge of the ring, watching a PR disaster unfold in real time, yet unable to deny the raw promotional gold it contained. Tomorrow, every sports outlet in the world would be running this footage. In the press box, Mina's fingers flew across her keyboard, trying to capture the surreal energy filling the arena. The veteran fighter, now seated at the medical station with an ice pack pressed against his jaw, watched with a mixture of concern and vindication. "Last chance, Mr. Norris," Jae-ho called out, holding the microphone loosely in one hand while spinning a casual kick with the other. "Show us if the legend has anything left." The arena fell suddenly, strangely silent. All eyes turned to Chuck Norris, who still hadn't spoken a single word. And then, with the same quiet dignity that had defined his career, Chuck stood. He rose without hurry, without drama, every movement deliberate and controlled. He removed his jacket, handed it to a nearby assistant, and straightened the collar of his shirt. The arena erupted. Time seemed to slow as Chuck Norris stood at the edge of the ring, his presence alone commanding a silence that spread through the arena like ripples across water. Mina found herself holding her breath along with thousands of others as the 84-year-old legend made his way toward the steps with unhurried precision. In the ring, Jae-ho's confident smirk flickered just for an instant before returning with doubled intensity. He spun the microphone in his hand, playing to the cameras that had swung to capture Chuck's approach. Well, he announced, voice carrying through the now hushed arena. "Looks like we're about to have a history lesson, folks." But his words lacked their earlier bite. Something had shifted. The energy in the Olympic gymnastics arena had transformed from the wild celebration of youth to the reverent anticipation of witnessing something rare. Daichi broke through his stunned paralysis, rushing toward his fighter. "Jae-ho!" he hissed, grabbing at the rope. "This isn't the plan. Pull back. Apologize. Say it was all promotion." Jae-ho brushed him off with a laugh. "Relax. This is gold. Do you know how many views this will get? The young champion versus the old legend?" He flexed his shoulders, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. "Besides, he's 80-something. This will be quick and respectful." Daichi's eyes widened. "You don't understand. That's Chuck Norris. He's not just some actor. He's a relic." Jae-ho finished dismissively. "From another time. Trust me." But trust was precisely what Daichi was quickly losing. In 3 years as Jae-ho's manager, he'd ridden the wave of his fighter's meteoric rise, the sponsorships, the social media empire, the global recognition. He'd carefully crafted every provocation, managed every controversy. This was uncharted territory. At the edge of the mat, Master Sun Hee Kim watched Chuck's approach with a complex mixture of emotions playing across her weathered face. She had known him for over 40 years, had seen him fight when both were in their prime. She knew what lay beneath that calm exterior. "Master Kim," Chuck said quietly as he reached her his first words of the evening. His voice was low, meant only for her ears. "You don't need to do this, old friend," she replied, in the same hushed tone. A slight smile touched the corner of his mouth. "I know." That was all. 2 words that contained decades of understanding. He wasn't rising to Jae-ho's bait. He was answering a different call altogether, one that Master Kim recognized immediately. In the press box, Mina's fingers hovered over her keyboard, torn between the journalistic duty to document this moment and the pure, childlike wonder of witnessing it. She had grown up watching Chuck Norris films, had trained in martial arts herself because of figures like him. To many in her generation, he existed more as legend than man. "The 8-time world karate champion enters the ring," she typed, her voice soft but clear into her microphone for the live stream. Not in anger, not in pride, but with the same quiet dignity that defined his competitive years. On the mat, Jae-ho had begun an impromptu shadowboxing display, high kicks, spinning techniques, acrobatic combinations that drew appreciative murmurs from his supporters. Each move was technically flawless, executed with the speed and precision that had made him champion. But there was something performative about it now. Something that felt hollow against the simple approach of the older man. Chuck stepped through the ropes without assistance, his movements economical and fluid despite his age. He wore no special gear, no fighting uniform, just his black shirt and pants. He carried himself like a man who had nothing to prove and nothing to fear. The contrast was stark. Jae-ho in his custom designed dobok emblazoned with sponsor logos, constantly in motion. Chuck in simple clothes, standing perfectly still at his corner of the mat. A hush fell over the arena again. Even Jae-ho's most vocal supporters seemed to sense the weight of the moment. This was no longer merely about a young champion defending his relevance. It had become something older. Something that reached back to the roots of martial arts itself. Master Kim stepped to the center of the mat. Though not originally scheduled to referee this impromptu match, no one questioned her authority as she raised her hand for attention. "This exhibition," she announced, her voice clear and strong despite her years, "will follow traditional rules of respect." She looked pointedly at Jae-ho. "No additional commentary is necessary. Let your arts speak." Jae-ho nodded, a hint of uncertainty finally creeping into his expression. He handed the microphone to an assistant, then turned to face Chuck across the mat, executing a practiced bow that managed to seem both technically correct and subtly dismissive. Chuck returned the bow with simple dignity, neither exaggerated nor minimal. Just right. In that moment, Mina saw something shift in the crowd. Phones lowered. Slightly. As if the gravity of what they were witnessing deserved more direct attention. The incessant flashes dimmed. In their place came a focused silence, the kind that falls when history is unfolding before one's eyes. "No timer," Master Kim continued. "No points. A demonstration of spirit. Not for victory." She stepped back, her role now more witness than referee. "Begin when ready." Jae-ho immediately resumed his bouncing stance, circling to his left, hands raised in his characteristic open guard position. His movements were quick, flashy, designed as much for cameras as for combat. Chuck stood still, centered. His hands hung loosely at his sides, his weight distributed evenly, his breathing slow and regular. To the untrained eye, he might have appeared unprepared. To those who really knew, he was the embodiment of readiness. "He's just standing there," someone in the crowd whispered loudly enough to be heard. Jae-ho, perhaps feeling the need to initiate, launched forward with a blistering combination, feint to the body followed by a high roundhouse kick that would have been nearly impossible for most opponents to track, let alone defend. Chuck slipped the kick with a subtle shift of his torso movement, so minimal yet so perfectly timed, that it made Jae-ho's spectacular technique pass harmlessly through empty air. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Daichi, watching from the edge, felt his stomach tighten. Jae-ho reset quickly, his confidence momentarily shaken but professional pride taking over. He launched another combination faster this time. A spinning back kick, transitioning into a jump roundhouse. Techniques that had demolished opponents half his age. Again, Chuck's defense was nearly invisible in its efficiency. No wasted motion, no dramatic blocks. He simply wasn't where the strikes landed, having moved just enough, just in time. The murmur in the crowd grew louder. Even those who had come to cheer Jae-ho were watching with a new kind of attention now. For the first time, a flicker of genuine concern crossed Jae-ho's face. He had expected age to slow Chuck's reactions. Had counted on it. Instead, he found himself facing something he'd never truly encountered before. Economy of motion so refined, it appeared almost supernatural. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What's happening? Daichi whispered to no one in particular. Why isn't he attacking? Master Kim, overhearing, offered a single quiet response. He is teaching. Jae-ho launched a third assault, a blisteringly fast sequence of kicks designed to approach from multiple angles, the kind of combination that had become his signature in world championships. Each technique was perfect. Textbook in its execution, backed by thousands of hours of practice. Chuck sidestepped the entire sequence with a single, fluid motion that seemed to defy the young champion's understanding of distance and timing. A gasp went up from the crowd. Mina, in the press box, found herself on her feet without realizing she had stood. For the first time since the impromptu match began, Chuck spoke, his voice carrying no further than Jae-ho's ears. Speed is not technique. 4 words. Delivered not with condescension, but with the simple authority of truth. Something flickered in Jae-ho's eyes, anger, confusion, and beneath it all, the first seed of doubt. He had built his entire identity on being faster, more spectacular, more innovative than those who came before. Now, faced with Chuck's imperturbable calm, those foundations were beginning to tremble. Fight me, he snapped, dropping the performance for raw emotion. Stop dodging and fight. Chuck merely watched him, his expression unchanged. I am. Frustration broke Jae-ho's composure. He charged forward with a yell, abandoning his calculated approach for a wild flurry of strikes, a sidekick, a spinning elbow, a hook punch. Raw aggression replaced technique. Chuck caught his arm. The simple movement, a direct block, followed by a subtle redirect of energizant Jae-ho stumbling past him, off balance and exposed. Chuck could have countered, could have struck. Instead, he released the young fighter, allowing him to regain his footing. The message was clear to everyone watching. This was not about hurting Jae-ho. It was about something far more profound. In the press box, Mina struggled to find words adequate for what she was witnessing. It's like watching physics being rewritten, she finally said into her microphone. The champion's speed and power mean nothing against Norris's understanding of space and time. The crowd had gone completely silent now. Every eye was locked on the mat where Jae-ho stood, breathing hard, facing an opponent who hadn't broken a sweat. Why? Jae-ho demanded, the single word containing all his confusion. Why won't you attack me? Chuck's response was quiet, but in the silence of the arena, it carried. Because you're attacking yourself. The words hung in the air like smoke. Because you're attacking yourself. 5 simple words that cut through Jae-ho's defenses more effectively than any physical strike could have. For a moment, genuine confusion crossed the young champion's face. Then, as understanding dawned, confusion hardened into renewed determination. This wasn't just about technique anymore, it was about his entire identity as a fighter, as a champion. as the face of modern Taekwondo. "No," Jae-ho said, his voice low but intense. "No philosophical tricks. This is about fighting, about who's better. Here and now." He reset his stance, centering himself, a visible change coming over his approach. Gone was the flashy movement, the playing to the crowd. In its place came something more focused, more authentic. He circled Chuck with new purpose, studying the legend with narrowed eyes. In the audience, thousands held their breath. The LED screens above the ring displayed both fighters in stark contrast. Jae-ho, young and coiled with tension. Chuck, decades older, yet emanating a calm that seemed almost otherworldly. Master Kim watched from the edge of the mat, her lined face revealing nothing, though those who knew her well might have detected the slightest nod of approval at Jae-ho's shift in demeanor. "The champion adapts," Mina narrated softly into her microphone, fingers flying across her keyboard. For perhaps the first time in his career, Jae-ho Park faces an opponent who cannot be overwhelmed by speed or intimidated by aggression. Daiichi stood frozen at ringside, all thoughts of media strategies and sponsorship opportunities forgotten. In 3 years managing Jae-ho's career, he had never seen his fighter truly challenged, not like this. Not on this fundamental level. Jae-ho launched forward again, but differently now. His attack was measured, controlled, a testing jab, followed by a middle kick. Not committed fully to either. Watching for Chuck's response. Chuck parried the jab with minimal movement, deflected the kick with a subtle shift of his leg. His eyes never left Jae-ho's, communicating something beyond words. The exchange continued, Jae-ho pressing forward with increasingly thoughtful combinations, Chuck responding with an economy of motion that made decades of mastery look effortless. It was like watching a physical conversation unfold. Technique. Answering technique in a language only those who had dedicated their lives to martial arts could fully comprehend. In the crowd, a strange transformation was occurring. The division between Jae-ho's supporters and Chuck's admirers began to dissolve, replaced by a collective appreciation for the pure art unfolding before them. Phones lowered further. Commercial agendas faded. What remained was the essence of what had drawn them all to martial arts in the first place. The pursuit of excellence. The discipline of mind and body working in perfect harmony. After several minutes of this exchange, Chuck did something unexpected. He countered. It wasn't dramatic. There was no battle cry, no telegraphed movement. One moment he was defending. The next his open palm had connected with Jae-ho's chest, not hard enough to damage, but with precisely enough force to send the younger man back a step. A collective intake of breath swept through the arena. Jae-ho blinked, genuinely surprised. He touched his chest where Chuck's hand had made contact, a gesture almost childlike in its wonder. "That," Master Kim said from the edge of the mat, her voice carrying in the hushed arena, "is control." Jae-ho's expression changed, confusion giving way to something else. Something that looked almost like respect. He approached again, more measured now. More thoughtful. This time when he struck, it was with technique stripped of showmanship, pure, efficient movement, born of thousands of hours of practice. Chuck met him halfway, their exchange accelerating into a demonstration that transcended competition. For brief, dazzling moments, the age difference between them seemed to vanish. There was only the art itself, two masters speaking a shared language of discipline and respect. Mina leaned forward in the press box, her live stream commentary almost a whisper now. "We're watching something rare here. Not a fight. Not a contest. This is transmission knowledge passing directly from one generation to another, through movement itself." The crowd sensed it too. The atmosphere in the arena had transformed completely from the raucous celebration of Jae-ho's earlier victory to something approaching reverence. "You're holding back?" Jae-ho said during a brief pause, his breathing controlled but heavy. Chuck nodded once. "So are you now." Why? Because you're finally fighting with purpose, not ego. The simple truth of it struck Jae-ho like a physical blow. For years, he had trained relentlessly, driven himself beyond limits, mastered techniques that few could even attempt, all while gradually losing sight of why he had begun this journey in the first place. In the front row, several martial arts masters from different disciplines watched with knowing eyes. They had seen this story before: the prodigy who confuses technical excellence with mastery, who mistakes audience reaction for true achievement. Again, Chuck said quietly, resetting his stance. Jae-ho hesitated only a moment before complying. This time, their exchange flowed even more naturally, attack and defense blending into a demonstration that showcased not just technique but understanding. After several minutes, Chuck stepped back, a subtle gesture that signaled a natural conclusion. He bowed a proper, traditional bow that contained genuine respect. Jae-ho found himself returning it without thought, without performance, his body remembering the form he had learned as a child before championships and sponsorships had complicated everything. As they straightened, something passed between theme and understanding that transcended words. In that silent moment, Jae-ho glimpsed what true mastery looked like. Not domination of others, but command of oneself. Master Kim stepped forward, raising her hand to draw the attention of the crowd. "The exhibition continues tomorrow," she announced, her voice firm but warm. "We thank both demonstrators for their contribution to our understanding." It was a masterful intervention, transforming what had begun as provocation into a planned educational moment. The audience responded with applause that started hesitantly but swelled into genuine appreciation. As Chuck turned to leave the mat, Jae-ho found himself stepping forward. "Wait," he said, the word escaping before he could consider it. Chuck paused, turning back with an expression of polite inquiry. Jae-ho began, then faltered, suddenly acutely aware of the thousands of eyes upon them, the cameras capturing every word. His carefully constructed public persona warred with something deeper, something more authentic that had been awakened during their exchange. Chuck waited, patient, his eyes revealing nothing yet seeing everything. "I would like to learn," Jae-ho finally said. The words simple, but costing him more than any physical effort ever had. A murmur swept through the crowd. Daiichi's jaw dropped. In the press box, Mina's fingers hovered over her keyboard, hardly believing what she was hearing from the notoriously arrogant champion. Chuck studied him for a long moment, gauging the sincerity behind the request. Then, with the slightest nod, he answered, "Tomorrow, 6 a.m., the practice hall. No fanfare, no public declaration of mentorship, just a time and a placing opportunity that Jae-ho would either take or leave." As Chuck exited the ring with the same quiet dignity with which he had entered it, the crowd's applause followed him, not the wild cheering that had greeted Jae-ho's earlier victory, but something more meaningful. Recognition, respect, appreciation for values that transcended spectacle. Jae-ho stood alone in the center of the mat, suddenly aware of the vast distance between technical proficiency and true mastery, a distance he had never before acknowledged, let alone sought to cross. Mina captured the moment in her live stream. "Something unprecedented has happened here tonight. A champion at the height of his powers has glimpsed a higher summit. The question now is whether he has the courage to begin climbing again, to become a student once more." As the crowd began to disperse, conversations buzzing with what they had witnessed, Master Kim approached Jae-ho. Her expression was neither condemning nor approving, simply present, a mirror reflecting his choice back to him. "The hardest belt to earn," she said quietly, "is the white belt the second time." Jae-ho met her gaze, understanding flooding through him. The beginning, the return to fundamentals, the humility to start over. For the first time in years, since before the championships and the fame and the carefully crafted image, Jae-ho felt something like peace settle over him. The constant need to prove himself, to be seen, to dominate it hadn't disappeared, but it had quieted, like a storm passing to reveal clearer skies. "Yes, Master Kim," he said, and bowed properly, fully, without reservation. The practice hall stood empty in the pre-dawn light, its polished wooden floor gleaming softly under the first rays, filtering through high windows. The space was simple, traditional, far removed from the neon lights and camera flashes of the exhibition arena. Here, there were no sponsors' logos emblazoned on the walls, no giant screens to magnify every moment. Just space, silence, and the lingering scent of polish and sweat that marked all true training grounds. Jae-ho arrived at 5:45 a.m., dressed not in his customized competition dobok, but in simple white training clothes. He had come alone, having told no one, not even Daichi, about this meeting. Some decisions, he had realized during a night of restless contemplation, needed to be made in privacy, away from the constant performance his life had become. He placed his shoes neatly by the entrance and stepped onto the floor with a bow that acknowledged the space itself. Old habits, ingrained before fame, had complicated everything. As he straightened, he caught his reflection in the mirrored wall, familiar yet somehow strange, as if he were seeing himself through new eyes. At precisely 6 o'clock, the door opened. Chuck entered without fanfare, also dressed simply in a black t-shirt and training pants. He carried nothing, needed nothing but himself. Their eyes met across the empty hall, and Jae-ho felt an unexpected flutter of nervousness in his stomach, a sensation he hadn't experienced before competition in years. "You came," Chuck observed, his voice neither surprised nor particularly pleased. A simple acknowledgement of fact. Jae-ho nodded, suddenly finding himself without words. All the clever remarks, the practice soundbites that usually flowed so easily, had abandoned him in this quiet space. Chuck crossed to the center of the floor, his movements fluid and unhurried. He gestured for Jae-ho to join him. They stood facing each other, the young champion and the aging legend, separated by 3 feet of polished wood and decades of experience. "Why are you here?" Chuck asked, his voice level, his eyes steady. It was a simple question, yet Jae-ho found himself struggling to answer. The ready responses about learning from the best, about honoring tradition, felt hollow before they even reached his lips. "I don't know," he admitted finally, the truth surprising him as much as it might have surprised Chuck. A slight nod was the only response. Then, "Show me your first form." Jae-ho blinked. "My first? You mean Taegyuk Iljang? The most basic pattern, taught to white belts in their first weeks of training?" "Yes." Jae-ho almost protested. He was a 7th Dan black belt, a world champion. He hadn't performed beginner forms in public since he was a child. But something in Chuck's steady gaze stopped him. This wasn't about humiliation, it was about something else entirely. He centered himself, took a breath, and began the form. The movements were simple low blocks, middle punches, basic stances, but, as he executed them, something strange happened. Without the pressure to impress, without cameras or judges or screaming fans, he found himself noticing details he had long since glossed over. The precise angle of his wrist during a block, the subtle shift of weight between stances, the coordination of breath with movement. When he finished, he returned to his starting position, oddly unsettled by the experience. Chuck said nothing for a long moment. Then, again, "But this time don't perform it. Live it." Jae-ho frowned slightly. "I don't understand." "You executed perfectly, but you were outside the form, showing it to me. Be inside it." The distinction was both subtle and profound. Jae-ho reset his position, trying to grasp what Chuck meant. This time, As he moved through the pattern, he focused not on how it would appear, but on how it felt. The solidness of his stance against the floor, the extension of energy through his strikes, the moment of perfect balance between movements. When he finished, he was breathing differently, not from exertion but from a kind of focused attention he hadn't experienced in years. Chuck nodded once. Better. He stepped forward. Now, we spar. But not like yesterday. No techniques above chest level. No jumping. Nothing fancy. The restrictions should have felt like handcuffs to a fighter known for his high acrobatic kicks. Instead, Jae-ho found himself intrigued by the challenge. Basic techniques only? There is nothing basic about the fundamentals when executed with full understanding. They began slowly, almost formally, Chuck initiating with a straight punch that Jae-ho blocked and countered. Their movement gradually increased in speed and complexity, but always within the constraints Chuck had established. No high kicks, no jumping, no spinning techniques. For Jae-ho, it was like learning a new language with a vocabulary he had long since taken for granted. The subtle timing of a simple side kick, the precise distance required for an effective jab, the almost invisible weight shifts that telegraphed intention before technique. Chuck moved with an efficiency that defied his ageno, fast in the way Jae-ho was fast, but precise in a way that made speed almost irrelevant. He seemed to exist in the space between Jae-ho's techniques, his counters arriving not with overwhelming force but with perfect timing. "You're fighting the air around me," Chuck observed during a brief pause, neither of them breathing heavily despite 10 minutes of continuous exchange. "Focus on center, not surface." Jae-ho absorbed the correction, adjusting his approach. Each time Chuck spoke, it was with this same economy: no lectures, no philosophy, just direct observations that cut to the heart of the matter. As their sparring continued, Jae-ho became aware of subtle shifts in his own movement. Without the pressure to impress, without the constant awareness of cameras and crowd reaction, his techniques were becoming purer, more honest, connected not to external validation but to internal understanding. It was in this state of heightened awareness that Jae-ho began to see what Chuck had meant about attacking himself. For years, he had been fighting against his own nature, adding flash where simplicity would suffice, seeking validation through spectacle rather than substance. Each technique had become burdened with the weight of expectation, his own and others. "Stop thinking about what comes next," Chuck said, reading his expression. "Be here." The instruction was simple yet profound. Jae-ho took a breath and tried again, focusing solely on the present exchangeano, planning 3 moves ahead, not calculating the impression he was making, just existing within each moment as it unfolded. Something shifted. His movements became more fluid, more connected. Time seemed to expand somehow, each second stretching to accommodate deeper understanding. Chuck nodded slightly, acknowledgement of the change. He increased the pace, not dramatically, but enough to test Jae-ho's newfound awareness. They moved across the polished floor in a dance of attack and defense, neither dominating, both fully engaged. For Jae-ho, it was unlike any sparring session he had experienced since childhood, before trophies and titles had complicated everything. There was no audience to impress, no points to score, no reputation to defend. Only the pure exchange of energy and technique, moment by moment. After nearly an hour, Chuck stepped back, signaling an end to their session. Jae-ho was surprised to find himself breathing hard, sweat soaking his simple white uniform. Not from physical exertion alone, but from the intense concentration their exchange had demanded. "You have excellent technique," Chuck said, the first direct praise he had offered. "But technique without purpose is just movement." Jae-ho bowed slightly, accepting both the compliment and the critique. "What is the purpose then, if not to win?" Chuck considered him for a moment. "Why did you start martial arts?" The question caught Jae-ho off guard. He had been asked this in countless interviews, had a polished answer about family tradition and natural talent. But standing here, in this quiet space with the morning light strengthening through the high windows, those practiced responses felt hollow. "I was 7, he said finally, finding himself speaking a truth he had almost forgotten. "There was a boy in my neighborhood who would take my lunch. One day, I saw a demonstration woman doing Taekwondo. She was not big, but so strong in how she moved. I thought if I could move like that, no one would take things from me again." Chuck nodded, understanding in his eyes. Protection, self-respect. Yes. Jae-ho looked down at his hands that had broken boards and bricks, that had struck opponents in tournaments around the world. But somewhere, I lost that. It became about being seen, about being the best. "There is nothing wrong with excellence," Chuck said, his voice gentle but firm. "The problem comes when we mistake external validation for internal growth." In the silence that followed, Jae-ho felt something shift inside him, like a weight he hadn't known he was carrying suddenly lightened. Not gone, but recognized for what it was. "Tomorrow," Chuck said, moving toward the door. "Same time." It wasn't a question, but Jae-ho answered anyway. "Yes, I'll be here." As Chuck left, Jae-ho remained in the center of the practice hall, the morning light now streaming fully through the windows. He began the first form again, Taegyeuk Iljang, moving through its simple patterns with new attention, new respect. Not performing it, living it. Outside the practice hall, the world continued its normal rhythm. Vendors set up stalls along the streets of Seoul. The exhibition center prepared for another day of demonstrations. Social media buzzed with clips and commentary from yesterday's unexpected confrontation between the young champion and the aging legend. In the hotel lobby, Daichi paced anxiously, checking his phone for the 1,000th time. No messages from Jae-ho. No explanation for his early disappearance. Just the echo of last night's events, and the growing concern that his carefully managed fighter was slipping beyond his control. "Have you seen him?" he demanded. As Mina Cho passed through the lobby, her press credentials hanging around her neck, she shook her head. "Not since last night, but I heard an interesting rumor that Chuck Norris was seen entering the old practice hall at dawn." Daiichi's expression tightened. "And Jae-ho? Was he there too?" Mina shrugged, professional discretion warring with journalistic instinct. "If he was, wouldn't that be a story worth telling properly? Not as scandal, but as transformation?" She left Daiichi standing in the lobby, his mind racing with implications. The sponsorship commitments, the promotional schedule, the carefully crafted image they had built together over 3 years. All potentially jeopardized by whatever was happening between his fighter and a legend from another era. Back in the practice hall, Jae-ho finished the form and stood still, sweat cooling on his skin, breath returning to normal. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt peaceful. Not triumphant. Not validated. Just present. In his body. In this space. In this moment. He thought of the exhibition center. Of the crowds that would gather there again today. Of the expectations that awaited him. The thought brought a familiar tightness to his chest, the pressure to perform, to dominate, to maintain the image he had created. But alongside that familiar pressure was something new. A question. Taking root in the quiet space. Chuck's presence had somehow created within him. What kind of martial artist do I truly want to be? The exhibition center hummed with anticipation. Word had spread through Seoul, like wildfire. Yesterday's confrontation between Jae-ho Park and Chuck Norris was the talk of martial arts circles worldwide. Tickets for today's demonstrations had sold out within hours. Camera crews from global sports networks jostled for position. Social media feeds overflowed with speculation and divided loyalties. Backstage, Daichi paced the length of the preparation area, phone pressed to his ear. Yes, I understand the opportunity, he said, voice tight with stress. No, I cannot confirm whether he'll challenge Norris again today. Yes, I'm aware of the viral metrics. Yes, I'm aware of the sponsorship implications. He ended the call with a sharp gesture just as the door opened. Jae-ho entered, dressed not in his usual flashy competition uniform, but in a simple, traditional dobok, without sponsor logos. Where have you been? Daichi demanded, relief and frustration battling in his voice. I've been calling you for hours. The sponsors are going crazy, the press is camped outside, and we need to strategize how to capitalize on. I was training, Jae-ho interrupted, his voice calm in a way Daichi had rarely heard before. Training? We have the biggest publicity opportunity of your career exploding right now, and you're training? Daichi ran a hand through his hair in exasperation. Look, I've drafted a statement that walks the perfect line respectful to Norris but maintaining your edge. We acknowledge his legacy while positioning you as the evolution of the art. The sponsors love it. We just need to… No. The single word stopped Daichi mid-sentence. He stared at Jae-ho, momentarily speechless. No statements, no positioning, no strategy. Jae-ho moved to the bench and began wrapping his hands with methodical precision. I'm here to demonstrate Taekwondo. That's all. Daichi studied his fighter with growing concern. This quiet, centered Jae-ho was unfamiliar territory. What happened this morning? Did Norris say something to you? A slight smile touched Jae-ho's lips. He said very little. That was part of the lesson. Before Daichi could respond, a staff member appeared at the door. 5 minutes until your demonstration. Champion Park. Jae-ho nodded, finishing his hand wraps. He stood, rolling his shoulders to loosen them, his movements precise and economical. Nothing wasted. Nothing for show. Jae-ho, Daichi said, lowering his voice. Think about what you're doing. We've spent 3 years building your brand as the bad boy of Taekwondo. The fighter who says what others won't. Who pushes boundaries. The fans expect. Maybe it's time they expected something different, Jae-ho replied. Maybe it's time I expected something different from myself. He walked past Daichi toward the entrance to the main exhibition floor, leaving his manager staring after him in confusion. In the press box, Mina Cho prepared for her broadcast, organizing her notes while keeping one eye on the entrance where competitors would appear. Her live stream from yesterday had garnered record viewership, and expectations for today's coverage were sky high. We're live in 30 seconds, her producer said through her earpiece. Angle is rematch of the century or young champion. Humbled your call, which narrative to push? Mina frowned slightly. How about neither? How about we just observe what actually happens? A short laugh. Sure. If what happens is dramatic enough to keep viewers engaged. Otherwise, we need the narrative hook. The lights dimmed in the exhibition center. A hush fell over the packed audience as the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Day 2 of the International Martial Arts Exhibition. Our first demonstrator today is the reigning Taekwondo World Champion, Jae-ho Park. Spotlights swung to the entrance as upbeat music began to pulse through the arena. Same entrance sequence Jae-ho had used for years, designed to hype the crowd before he even appeared. But when he walked out, it was with none of his usual swagger. No playing to the cameras. No raising his arms to encourage cheers. Just a measured walk to the center of the demonstration area, where he bowed to the audience with formal precision. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered out of habit. Others watched in confused silence, sensing the change in his demeanor but not understanding its significance. Mina leaned forward in her seat, instantly alert to the transformation. Champion Park enters with notably different energy today, she narrated for her viewers. Gone is the showmanship that has become his trademark. In its place, we see a focus and composure that suggests yesterday's encounter with Chuck Norris may have had a profound impact. In the front row, Master Son, Hee Kim watched with quiet approval. Beside her sat Chuck Norris, his expression neutral yet attentive. Jae-ho began his demonstration with none of his usual flash. No music accompanied his movements now. No calls for audience reaction. Instead, he moved through a traditional form with a precision and presence that commanded attention in a different way, not through spectacle but through substance. Each technique flowed into the next with perfect balance. Each stance grounded firmly to the floor. His breathing remained controlled, his focus absolute. He was not performing for the audience, but embodying the art itself. When he finished the form, the arena remained silent for a beat before erupting into applause, the wild cheering his acrobatics usually inspired. But something more respectful, more appreciative of the mastery on display. Mina found herself momentarily speechless before recovering her professional composure. "What we're witnessing," she said into her microphone, "is artistry stripped back to its essence. The champion showing us not what Taekwondo looks like, but what it truly is." As the applause faded, Jae-ho moved to the center of the demonstration area again. He bowed once more to the audience, then turned and bowed directly to where Chuck Norris sat beside Master Kim. A murmur rippled through the crowd, all eyes shifting between the young champion and the martial arts legend. The energy in the arena crackled with anticipation. Would there be another confrontation? Another challenge? Instead, Jae-ho spoke, his voice carrying clearly without need of a microphone. "Yesterday, I challenged a master without understanding what mastery truly means." His words were measured, sincere. "I confused speed with skill, spectacle with substance. For this, I apologize not just to Master Norris, but to all who practice martial arts with true dedication to its principles." In the press box, producers were frantically signaling for camera operators to capture every angle of this unexpected moment. Social media feeds exploded with real-time reactions. Daichi stood at the edge of the demonstration area, his expression cycling through shock, dismay, and calculation as he watched 3 years of carefully constructed branding dissolve before his eyes. "Master Norris," Jae-ho continued, addressing Chuck directly, "with your permission, I would like to demonstrate what I began to learn this morning. Not to impress, but to honor the lesson." Chuck studied him for a long moment, his expression revealing nothing. Then, with a slight nod, he rose from his seat and walked toward the demonstration area. The crowd fell completely silent. No music played. No announcer spoke. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath as Chuck stepped onto the mat to stand facing Jae-ho. They bowed to each other with mutual respect. What followed was unlike anything the audience had expected. Not a fight. Not a competition. Instead, they witnessed something rare, a genuine exchange between teacher and student, between experience and potential, between different generations united by the same pursuit. They moved together through basic techniques, blocks, strikes, kicks, each executed with a clarity and intention that transformed simplicity into art. There was no wasted motion, no playing to the crowd. Just two martial artists completely present in each moment, communicating through the shared language of disciplined movement. For those in the audience with enough knowledge to understand what they were seeing, it was breathtaking. For those without such background, it was still somehow mesmerizing, the pure authenticity of the exchange, drawing them in, despite its lack of flash. "What we're witnessing," Mina said softly into her microphone, her voice thick with emotion, "is not a passing of the torch, but a reconnection to the flame that ignites all true martial arts discipline, respect, and the endless journey toward mastery." As their demonstration progressed, something remarkable happened in the arena. Phones lowered. Conversations ceased. The constant click of cameras faded. The audience became not just spectators but participants in the moment through their complete attention. After 15 minutes that seemed both instant and eternal, Chuck and Jae-ho returned to their starting positions and bowed to each other once more. No words were exchanged. None were needed. As Chuck turned to leave the demonstration area, the silence broke not with cheers or chants, but with something more profound. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation that contained not excitement but reverence. Jae-ho remained in the center of the mat, head slightly bowed, experiencing an emotion he hadn't felt in competition for years. Not the triumph of victory, but the quiet satisfaction of growth. In that moment, surrounded by thousands yet somehow alone with his own transformation, Jae-ho understood what Chuck had been teaching him. Martial arts was never about defeating others. It was about confronting yourself, your ego, your limitations, your assumptions, and finding a path towards something more authentic. As the applause continued, he looked up to meet Chuck's eyes across the demonstration area. The legend offered the slightest nod, not approval, exactly, but acknowledgement. One martial artist recognizing another on the same endless path. And in that simple gesture, Jae-ho found something he hadn't even known he was seeking. Not validation from the crowd, not dominance over opponents, but connection to something larger than himself. Tradition, a discipline, a way of being that had sustained countless practitioners across centuries. The arrogance that had defined him broke not with a dramatic crash, but with a quiet revelation. True strength had nothing to prove. The final day of the International Martial Arts Exhibition dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the windows of the practice hall where Jae-ho arrived before dawn. He was surprised to find he wasn't the first one there. Master Sunny Kim sat in meditation at the center of the polished floor, her eyes closed, her breathing steady. At 74, she moved with the fluid grace of someone half her age, a living testament to the lifelong journey of martial arts. She opened her eyes as Jae-ho entered, observing him with a gaze that seemed to see past surface to essence. "You're early," she noted, her voice carrying the quiet authority of decades of teaching. Jae-ho bowed respectfully before sitting across from her in the traditional position, feet tucked beneath him, back straight but not rigid. "I couldn't sleep." A slight smile touched her lips, the beginning of wisdom, a mind too full of questions for rest. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, the morning light strengthening around them, dust motes dancing in the golden beams that cut across the empty space. In the distance, Seoul was beginning to wake, the faint hum of traffic growing steadily as the city stirred to life. Finally, Jae-ho spoke the question that had kept him awake through the night, turning over and over in his mind like a stone being polished by persistent waves. "What happens now?" Master Kim considered him, hearing the layers beneath his simple question. What happened to the identity he had built, to the expectations of sponsors and fans, to the path he had been traveling with such single-minded determination? "Now," she said, "you choose again, not between success and failure, but between different definitions of success." She rose in a single fluid motion, knees unbending with none of the stiffness one might expect from someone her age. Crossing to a small wooden cabinet in the corner, she retrieved an old photograph in a simple frame and brought it back to where Jae-ho sat. "Look," she said, offering him the image. It showed a much younger Master Kim standing beside Chuck Norris, both in their competitive prime. Trophies held aloft at what appeared to be a major tournament from decades past. Their faces shone with the simple joy of achievement, untainted by the complications fame would later bring. 1974, she explained. "We were both so certain we knew what victory meant." Jae-ho studied the photograph, seeing the seeds of the masters they would become in their younger selves. And now? Master Kim reclaimed the photograph, looking at it with a mixture of fondness and something like amusement before returning it to its place. Now we understand that trophies tarnish, records are broken, and the applause eventually fades. What remains is the path itself and whether you walked it with integrity. Outside the practice hall, Seoul was fully awake. Street vendors set up their stalls, the scent of hotteok and tteokbokki beginning to fill the morning air. Early commuters hurried toward subway stations, faces buried in phones. And at the exhibition center just a few blocks away, preparations were underway for the final day of demonstrations, a day that would culminate in Jae-ho's scheduled closing performance. In the hotel restaurant, Mina Cho sat with her laptop open, putting the finishing touches on an article that had evolved far beyond her original assignment. What had begun as coverage of a martial arts exhibition had become an exploration of transformation, not just Jae-ho's, but the potential for change that existed in everyone who witnessed it. Her phone buzzed with a message from her editor. Need final copy in 30. Angle on Park's career impact? Sponsorship losses? Next steps? Mina sighed, fingers hovering over her keyboard. The pressure to reduce these events to clickbait was strong, but something in her resisted. What she had witnessed deserved more thoughtful treatment. She began typing. Some victories aren't counted in points or measured by applause. Some defeats contain the seeds of greater triumph. In the space of 2 days, Taekwondo champion Jae-ho Park experienced both and in the process reminded us all what martial arts at its best can teach us about humility, growth, and the courage to change course when the path no longer serves. She paused, rereading her words. They felt true, but incomplete. After a moment's consideration, she continued. In a world that increasingly values spectacle over substance, Park's journey forces us to question our own definitions of success. When we strip away the lights, the cameras, the roar of the crowd, what remains? For Park, the answer appears to be emerging. The quiet satisfaction of pursuing excellence for its own sake, not for the validation it brings. Across the hotel lobby, Daichi sat surrounded by open laptops and scattered papers, deep in conversation with representatives from Jae-ho's major sponsors. The mood was tense, the discussion centered on contract clauses and brand alignment. I understand your concerns, he said, his usual smooth confidence strained by lack of sleep and uncertainty. His normally immaculate appearance showed signs of wearity slightly loosened, a shadow of stubble darkening his jaw. But what if we position this as evolution rather than contradiction? The maturing of a champion. The depth beyond the flash. There's a powerful narrative here if we're willing to. The narrative isn't the issue. One executive interrupted. A woman in her 40s whose sharp business suit matched her equally sharp tone. The metrics are. Our analytics show a 60% drop in social engagement since yesterday's. Whatever that was. Not a fight. Not entertainment. Just 2 guys doing basic moves that any beginner could do. Daichi felt a flare of unexpected defensiveness. What they demonstrated was mastery, not basics. The subtlety might not translate to viral clips. But exactly our point. Another sponsor representative cut in, not bothering to look up from his tablet where engagement graphs showed a clear downward trend. We invested in Park's ability to generate attention. If that's changing, we need to reevaluate our partnership. A third executive, older than the others, leaned forward. Look, Daichi. We all appreciate your loyalty to your fighter. But our responsibility is to our shareholders. The Jae-ho Park brand was built on being provocative, spectacular, boundary-pushing. If he's abandoning that identity, we may need to abandon him. The conversation continued in circles, but Daichi found his attention drifting. Through the lobby windows, he could see the exhibition center across the street. Banners featuring Jae-ho's image, fluttering in the morning breeze. Images captured months ago. Jae-ho mid-flying kick, expression fierce, embodying the aggressive confidence they had so carefully cultivated. Was that version of Jae-ho gone? And if so, what would take its place? More importantly, Daichi realized with a strange pang that felt almost like grief. Did he even know who Jae-ho truly was beneath the persona they had crafted together? Back in the practice hall, Master Kim rose fluidly to her feet. "Walk with me," she said to Jae-ho, moving toward the door. They made their way through awakening streets, the morning air crisp, the city's energy building around them. Neither spoke as they walked, comfortable in the shared silence. Occasionally, someone would recognize Jae-ho, doing a double-take or nudging a companion. But without his flashy competition uniform or the swagger he usually affected in public, many simply passed by, unaware that the world champion walked among them. There was a strange freedom in this semi-anonymity that Jae-ho hadn't experienced in years. The constant performance of being Jae-ho Park, Taekwondo champion, had become so habitual that he'd almost forgotten what it felt like to simply exist, unpressured by others' expectations. Eventually, they reached a small, traditional tea house tucked away from the main thoroughfare. Inside, the atmosphere was one of calm simplicity: wooden tables, cushioned floor seating, the gentle sound of water heating. Paper lanterns cast soft light over walls decorated with calligraphy scrolls, each bearing a single word: peace, harmony, balance, discipline. As they settled at a corner table, Master Kim finally spoke again. "Chuck left this morning." Jae-ho looked up in surprise. "Left? But the exhibition isn't over." His purpose here was completed. She met his eyes directly. "The question is whether yours has just begun." Their tea arrived, served in simple ceramic cups, without adornment, the beauty lying in the function, not decoration. Master Kim thanked the server with a slight bow before continuing. "When I was younger than you, I won many tournaments, collected many trophies. For a time, I believed that was the measure of mastery." She sipped her tea, eyes distant with memory. "It took losing badly, publicly, to a much older master for me to understand how little I knew. Like what happened with me and Chuck," Jae-ho said quietly, turning his cup slowly between his palms, feeling its warmth. Master Kim nodded, though your humbling was perhaps more dramatic. A hint of amusement touched her eyes. Few experience their moment of reckoning in front of thousands, with cameras capturing every moment. Jae-ho winced slightly. "I never thought about it that way. The cameras, the audience, they were always part of why I fought. To be seen, to be acknowledged. There is nothing wrong with acknowledgement," Master Kim said, her voice gentle but firm. "The question is, acknowledged for what? For flash that fades, or for substance that endures?" They drank their tea in thoughtful silence, the sounds of the city growing louder outside as morning progressed toward midday. "I received a message from Chuck before he left," Master Kim said, setting down her empty cup. "He asked me to tell you something." Jae-ho leaned forward slightly, eager despite himself. He said, "The most difficult opponent you will ever face is the one you see in the mirror every morning. Defeat him with honesty, and no other victory will ever be necessary." The words settled over Jae-ho like a mantle, heavy with responsibility, yet somehow liberating in their truth. "My final demonstration is scheduled for this evening," he said after a moment. "Everyone expects what they've always seen from me." Master Kim studied him over the rim of her teacup. And what does Jae-ho expect from Jae-ho? It was the perfect question, simple yet cutting to the heart of his struggle. Not what others wanted from him, but what he demanded of himself. As they left the tea house, Jae-ho noticed a small martial arts school across the street. Through the window, he could see children practicing beginners, from the look of their uncertain movements. Their instructor moved among them with patient corrections, focusing not on the fastest or most talented, but giving each child the same careful attention. Jae-ho stopped, watching. "I'd forgotten," he said quietly. Master Kim followed his gaze. "Forgotten what?" "How it feels at the beginning. When every small improvement feels like a miracle." He watched a little girl, no more than 7, execute a front kick with complete concentration, her face lighting up when the instructor nodded approval. When the art itself is enough. Master Kim smiled. A genuine warmth in her expression. It is always enough. We are the ones who forget. As the day progressed toward evening, the exhibition center filled for the final demonstrations. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, social media buzzing with speculation about what form Jae-ho's closing performance would take. Would he return to his flashy, crowd-pleasing style? Would he challenge another legend? Or would they witness something entirely new? Backstage, Jae-ho prepared alone. No music blasting through headphones, no entourage managing his appearance. Just a martial artist, centering himself before demonstration. He moved through basic stretches, feeling each muscle wake and warm. His mind was clearer than it had been in years, focused, not on how he would appear to others, but on the quality of presence he would bring to each movement. Daichi appeared at the door, his expression a complex mixture of concern and resignation. "The sponsors want to meet tomorrow," he said without preamble. "To discuss alignment of values moving forward." The air quotes were audible in his tone. Jae-ho nodded, continuing his warm-up stretches. "I understand." "Do you?" Daichi stepped into the room, lowering his voice. 3 years of work. Millions in endorsements. A global brand we built together. All potentially gone because of whatever transformation you're going through. Jae-ho straightened, meeting his manager's gaze directly. "Not gone. Changed. Like me. And if they drop you? If the followers unfollow? If the next fighter with flashy kicks and a big mouth takes your place in the spotlight?" It was a fear that would have paralyzed Jae-ho just days ago. Now, he found it held less power. "Then, I'll still have Taekwondo," he said simply. "The real Taekwondo. Not the performance of it." Daichi studied him for a long moment, seeing the genuine change in his fighter's eyes. Finally, he sighed, shoulders relaxing slightly. "Well, if we're reinventing your brand, we might as well do it right. Authenticity is marketable too, you know. Different audience, different sponsors, but potentially more sustainable long-term." Jae-ho smiled, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. Always the strategist. "Someone has to be." Daichi glanced at his watch. 5 minutes until you're on. Whatever you're planning, make it count." As Daichi left, Jae-ho took a final moment to center himself. He thought of Chuck's words, passed through Master Kim. "The most difficult opponent you will ever face is the one you see in the mirror every morning." He was beginning to understand what that meant, not as philosophy, but as lived truth. The constant battle against ego, against the need for validation, against the fear of not being enough. It wasn't a fight won once, but a daily practice of honesty and humility. The call came for him to take the floor. He moved toward the entrance, hearing the announcer's voice building anticipation, feeling the energy of the crowd even before he could see them. In the press box, Mina watched with professional curiosity and personal investment. Her article had been published that morning, taking a more thoughtful approach than her editor had wanted. To her surprise, it was outperforming the more sensationalist coverage, resonating with readers hungry for meaning beyond spectacle. "Our final demonstrator tonight," the announcer's voice boomed through the arena. "The Taekwondo World Champion, Jae-ho Park." The crowd erupted as spotlights swung toward the entrance. Expectation hung in the air. Would they see the return of the showman, or the continuation of yesterday's transformation? Jae-ho walked out, not with his usual swagger, but with quiet confidence. He wore a simple white Taekwondo sponsor logos. No customization, nothing to distract from the art itself. He bowed to the audience, to the judges' table where Master Kim sat, and finally to the mat itself, acknowledging the space where mastery was pursued. For the next 30 minutes, he demonstrated not the flashiest techniques in his repertoire, but the deepest. Forms executed with precision and presence. Combinations that showcase not speed for its own sake, but the perfect balance of power and control. Breaking demonstrations that emphasized not the number of boards, but the focus of energy. Throughout, he maintained the centered calm he had glimpsed in his brief time with Chuck, not performing Taekwondo, but embodying it. Not seeking to impress, but to express the essence of the art that had shaped his life. In the audience, reactions varied. Some, expecting spectacular jumps and kicks, seemed disappointed. Others leaned forward in their seats, recognizing that they were witnessing something rarer than flash. They were seeing authenticity, commitment, the true spirit of martial arts made visible. As Jae-ho finished his demonstration, returning to center mat for a final bow, the arena fell silent for a heartbeat before erupting into applause. Not the wild cheering of spectacle, but the deeper appreciation of witnessing mastery in the making. Master Kim rose from her seat at the judges' table, acknowledging Jae-ho with a bow that contained both approval and challenge, recognition of growth made and growth still to come. As Jae-ho left the demonstration area, he passed a group of young martial artists waiting for the closing ceremony to begin. Children and teenagers in crisp uniforms, eyes wide with admiration. One small boy, no more than 7, bowed to him with perfect form, eyes shining. Jae-ho returned the bow with equal respect, recognizing in the child's earnest face his own younger self before championships and fame, when martial arts had been about protection and self-respect, about becoming stronger not to dominate others, but to become more fully himself. "Sir," the boy said, his voice barely above a whisper, "how do you stay so calm when you fight?" The question caught Jae-ho off guard with its simplicity and depth. A week ago, he might have given some practiced answer about confidence or training. Now, he crouched to meet the child at eye level. "I'm still learning that myself," he said honestly. "But I think it begins with remembering why you started in the first place. Not to be seen, but to be better than you were yesterday." The boy nodded solemnly, absorbing the words as if they were the most profound wisdom. Perhaps, Jae-ho realized, they were. In that moment of connection across generations, Jae-ho understood the final piece of what Chuck and Master Kim had been teaching him. Legacy wasn't measured in trophies or followers or viral moments. It lived in the quiet transmission of values, discipline, humility, the courage to begin again when necessary. As the exhibition's closing ceremony began, Jae-ho slipped away from the crowds, finding a quiet exit that led to the street outside. The evening air was cool against his face as he walked. No particular destination in mind, simply present in the moment. His phone buzzed in his pocket, undoubtedly Daichi, with updates about sponsor reactions or media requests. For once, it could wait. There would be time tomorrow for those conversations, for navigating the practical implications of his transformation. Tonight was for integration, for allowing the lessons of these intense days to settle into his bones, becoming not just knowledge but wisdom. As he walked through the vibrant streets of Seoul, anonymous among thousands of evening pedestrians, Jae-ho felt a peace he hadn't known in years. The constant pressure to prove himself, to defend his position at the top, had eased, not because he cared less about excellence, but because he understood more clearly what true excellence entailed. It wasn't about defeating others. It was about the daily discipline of defeating one's own worst impulses, arrogance, fear, the hunger for validation that could never be satisfied from outside. He found himself near the small martial arts school they had passed earlier that day. The lights were still on, though classes had ended. Through the window, he could see the instructor alone on the floor, moving through a form with the same careful attention he had given his young student's commitment, undiminished by the absence of an audience. Jae-ho watched, feeling something like recognition. This, too, was mastery not performed for others, but lived for oneself. Not a destination reached, but a path walked with integrity. In the quiet center of his mind, he heard Chuck's voice again. The most difficult opponent you will ever face is the one you see in the mirror every morning. Jae-ho smiled slightly, accepting the challenge. It would be the work of a lifetime, a single dramatic moment, but a daily choice. The path would not always be clear. There would be missteps, regressions, moments when old habits reasserted themselves. But he had glimpsed another way of being, not just as a martial artist, but as a human being. And once seen, it could not be unseen. As he turned toward his hotel, Jae-ho felt not the closing of a chapter, but the opening of a new one. The showman had not died. He had simply been integrated into something larger, something truer. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, sponsors to renegotiate, a public image to redefine, a career to reconsider. But for tonight, in this moment, he was simply a martial artist walking the ancient path of self-discovery, one step, one breath, one choice at a time. And in that simplicity, he found something he hadn't known he was seeking. Not the roar of the crowd, but the quiet certainty of walking his own authentic path. Not the flash of momentary glory, but the enduring satisfaction of growth that could not be measured in trophies or titles. It was, he realized, the true legacy of his encounter with Chuck Norris, not a public defeat, but a private victory. Not an ending, but a beginning. The most important fight of his life was just getting started. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.